is a nonprofit. We are a nonprofit, a 501c3. We try to bring together all the 600 or so neighborhoods in the county and the city, and also another 100 or so in Teller County. And given that this is El Paso County, no one's surprised that we do that with private support, individuals, corporations, that sort of thing, and some support from the government. But in most cities and counties our size, come on in. That's all done with only taxpayer money. So I remember talking to the mayor of Boston 6 or so years ago, and he had looked me up, so he knew what I was doing. He said, "Just let you know that I've asked for $3 million to start a neighborhood organization, a neighborhood department in Boston." And I thought, wow, I could use $3 million. Exactly. So not happening here anytime soon. Just a couple housekeeping things. There's a bathroom right on the other side of that wonderful picture. The pictures, by the way, are a result of an artist who did a different picture every day for a year of the same tree, and it's remarkable what he's accomplished. Sarah can tell you more of the details if you're interested. We'd like to thank, there's another bathroom on the other side of the door if you need that, and we'd like to thank Griffith's Blessing for some financial support for making this possible. We also like to thank Einstein Bagels for the bagels, and Prospect Farms. You want to stand up?
Yeah. So this morning we have some peanut butter chocolate chip zucchini bread, and some grape jelly made with some grapes from back in the day when Venetian Village had a lot of Italian folks living in that neighborhood. So some historic grape jelly. I also wanted to make a little announcement about, did anyone see the giant pumpkin on their way here today? Yes. So there's going to be a celebration for that giant pumpkin, and funds are going to go to another farm, Benitucci Farm, and that's going to be this Saturday, 4 to 8 p.m. It's called Pumpkin Fest, and it's just a celebration of our newest public art installation downtown, one that had over 200 community members help build it, and that's put on by Concrete Couch, the organization that helped facilitate the construction of this community-built pumpkin.
Cool. Dale Neesmith, who's on our board of directors, just walked in. Thank you, Dale. Dale's also the president of Windjammer HOA, up just south of Briargate. Now for the main attractions. Henry Yankowski is the county administrator. Jeff Green is the mayor's chief of staff and the principal administrative officer in the city. I like to think of both of these guys as friends. I really like working with them. They are terrific people, very good. I think just sort of the epitome of public service. You guys are welcome to sit down. We've asked them to talk about what they do briefly, each of them, what they do briefly, and then we'll open it up to questions. And one of the things I guess as a sort of lead-in question when you're ready for that is, how can the community be more involved in what each government does? And you guys work much with nonprofits. I think I know the answer to that one. But anyway, Henry, would you like to start?
Well, I was hoping Jeff would be going to get on this. He'll make me feel more relaxed.
I've known Henry for a long time. First of all, I want to say, and I talk with my hands, and I like to move around and all of that. The city attorney gives me a hard time because she says, "Now, Jeff." First of all, I want to thank everybody for being here, and I will say, based upon the attendance this morning, those that did come, thank you very much, because a lot of perseveration, and but also it represents truly what the roles that Henry and I both have. As Henry and I are both the chief administrators for the city and the county, but most of our work is done behind the scenes. Our jobs is to ensure that good policy development is happening on behalf of the mayor, the city council, and the board of county commissioners. And you know, I really thought that I was going from having 5 bosses as the former county administrator, to when I went over to the city, just having 1 boss, but really I have 10. Because if city council's not happy, then the mayor's work is going to be very difficult to get it done. And so part of the relationships I have is to ensure that the request of city council is being carried forward. And one of the most important things that I will ever stress, and it really makes a huge difference in this community and how this community advances policy, is political stability. And there are going to be major differences, fundamental differences, philosophical differences, fiscal differences between the mayor and the city council. But overall, the mayor and the city council moving in the same direction is what's going to instill confidence in the community. But also what that really means is that when people look at investing in our community, advancing economic development, advancing support, then it makes it so much easier. The mayor and I were at a meeting in Denver a few months ago, and there was a major investor that was looking at coming to Colorado Springs, and this is a multi-billion-dollar organization, and they said that we are now giving serious consideration to coming to Colorado Springs, El Paso County, because of the political stability. The environment was not stable, it was not conducive. And one of the most important things that in our roles is to ensure that the elected officials have good information, but they also have confidence in what we're saying. And, you know, both of us are going through our budget process. And yesterday, the mayor and the council and I were going back and forth, and the mayor has presented a balanced budget. It's a lot of work that goes into developing the city's budget. The city's general fund budget proposed for 2017 is $272 million. Excluding the utilities enterprise, the total city budget, including all funds, is $496 million. Now, what's so sad about that is $496 million, but when you look at what the true needs are and what affects most everybody in this room, and that is our Public Works Department, it's our Planning Department. When you look at economic development and what's associated with that, and also community development, when you look at the funding the city really has, it really comes down to the general fund. And so the other enterprises, you have the airport enterprise, we still have the Memorial Health Systems enterprise, and so with the lease agreement with UCH is that the city receives funding on an annual basis that comes to the enterprise, and then it's dispersed to the Health Foundation, and the Health Foundation goes through its annual granting process to provide funding to promote the health and wellness of our region for both El Paso County and Teller counties. A lot of things that we do is really behind the scenes. I have the distinct pleasure to work with some great professionals at the city. And, you know, it depends upon if you're looking at Briargate, or if you're looking at Skyway, or you're looking at Stetson Hills, are you looking at downtown, you know, how we look at promoting policies. One of the most important things that we do is codes. And how are the codes, you know, our codes? I think you heard from Mr. Wasaki, and Peter can be a very funny guy. And Peter and I joke a lot. And Brian T. Tillers here. Brian can attest to the frivolousness sometimes of Mr. Wasaki. But it's about also enjoying your job. But when you look at very particular community needs, is that what is really different between the city and the county is how we're structured. And just because how the structures are set up will create inherent conflict, because the city of Colorado Springs is a home rule municipality, and that the city charter is actually our constitution. It defines what the roles and the rights and the entitlements the city has in administering and providing services to the citizens of Colorado Springs. And so with home rule status, there are certain exemptions that we have from the Colorado Revised Statutes. And so the charter, being our constitution, is the outline of how we're going to function as government. And then we have our city codes, our municipal codes. And the city charter is about this thick, and the municipal codes are this thick. It's 3 volumes. And I get the distinct pleasure of referring to the city codes, because the city attorney reminds me constantly, says, now Jeff, you gotta look at that city code again. But with the city codes, what we try to do is we try to provide, solutions to the process and how we administer our charter. Every ordinance that city council passes, there's 2 actions the city council can conduct. One is by ordinance and one's by resolution. A city ordinance technically requires 3 readings. One is informal, through work session. And for any action can be taken by council, they go through a work session process. And then the council has 2 readings. There are certain actions as described by code that the city council can take through resolution, which requires work session and 1 formal reading. And sometimes people ask the question, how come the city can't respond as quickly? And I do miss the county aspect, because the county can do everything by resolution, because the county is a statutory county, and so they can be more agile and they can move more quickly in resolving certain issues. With the city council and with the city itself, is because we are required to go through these different readings, we cannot be as agile. But also what's important too is with the readings, you provide great transparency. And transparency is very important in all of our decision-making process. Real quick, I just want to go through, the administrative processes at the city. Planning and development, you've heard from Mr. Wasaki. I also want to give a big shout out to Ryan. Ryan was honored by the Downtown Partnership for all of his work.
Awesome.
Ryan does a great job as our urban planner and manager of our urban planning. And one of the things that we really focus on very strongly is that the downtown is the heart of our city, but also how do we look at all of our neighborhoods. And Megan Harrington is our land use manager, and Megan gets to manage all of the land use activities outside of our urban core. Public Works is something that touches everybody. The greatest amount of input I receive from citizens is on bus routes and bike lanes. I don't receive as much input about budgets, but bus routes and bike lanes, I receive a lot of encouragement from different citizens and neighborhoods and community groups. Budget and finance, economic development, community development are all tied together. The municipal courts, I get the opportunity to work with our municipal court administrator. And the municipal court administrator has a unique role. The municipal court administrator is the chief judge of the municipal court, as well as being the administrator of the courts. And the city has the pleasure of funding the municipal courts, but also we have the direct administration of the municipal courts. And as we look at all the other functions of the city, I just want to make sure I'm not missing anybody. Parks and recreation. Parks and recreation is so important to our community because it's about our way of life. It's about the quality of life. And, one of the things that I've been most proud of is the reason that we have a great park system is because of our citizen volunteers. I've seen it both on the county side and the city side. And we cannot provide the level of service and provide the quality program with all of our volunteers. Recently, we had a major parks project in which 300 volunteers from across the community came together. In a matter of about 8 to 10 hours, we rebuilt a whole city park to provide support to that neighborhood. And when you look at parks, when you look at community services, the core of our neighborhoods is having a good park system, but also having that interaction. And when I look at what's happening in the community, one of the first things I always do is have a conversation with Dave and say, what's going on in the neighborhoods? Because really, that's where your democracy begins. And that's where the community really begins. It's in your neighborhoods. I've kind of given a really broad overview. I will say, I really enjoy working with Henry. Henry and I laugh a lot. We also have to be very, very serious. But it's a real pleasure to work with a very competent administrator.
Jeff's very nice. How do you follow that, right? You know, Jeff, I think, started off by talking about finding, stability in the community, and that how there's sometimes when the county and city appear that they're perhaps not getting along, and I'll just give an example of, kind of why that may be. Some time ago, you had the pothole tax, and the mayor very frankly came to the commission and said, look, we're not going to include the unincorporated areas because, quite frankly, you poll poorly in certain areas, and also we think that there's a possibility of one or a couple of your commissioners may come out against it, which may really hurt us. So, I think that open and frank conversation helps. I think that, at the same time, we have the same issues that the city has with roads. So I think that, in some way, we didn't like the message. We liked the way it was delivered, but at the same time, you're like, yeah, because we actually needed to be part of that, we felt.
Can you speak a little louder?
Yeah, I'm sorry. My voice is not that strong, so I'm sorry. I'll do the best I can.
There are a couple seats up in front if it'd be easier, so.
Well, it's funny because, in the evening, my wife says, look, I'm having trouble sleeping, so if you would just talk to me for 5 minutes. She said something about, you just help me drift right off. And that's it. So hopefully that's not going to happen. But I guess I wanted to start kind of with some of the areas that I don't have as much direct responsibility for. The treasurer, which is an elected official, and that's basically the county's banker. He invests all the funds, those kind of things. So while he's in our building and we have building responsibility, security responsibility, I don't have any direct responsibility with the functions of the treasurer. The same with the assessor. He values all real property for tax purposes. He maintains and keeps and gathers property records, ownerships, legals, those kind of things. And again, he's in one of our buildings that we maintain, security and vehicles, those kind of things. The clerk and recorder is another elected function, and he's responsible for agendas at the Board of County Commissioners, all the video, all of those things to make sure that those are maintained and correctly, and I guess what would be the term that you can see in
Catalog? Catalog or archive?
yeah, right. So he does all of that. Also, he does motor vehicles. He does some things for the state, like licenses. I think they allowed the county clerks to do some form of licenses, and he does more and more of those because you can spend 20 minutes at one of his offices or a couple hours, I guess, at the state office. So there's more and more activity with that. I guess, kind of future, I'd like to get another location as opposed to in Centennial Hall for the clerk for that motor vehicle function downtown. Haven't been able to find it. We had a couple of ideas that didn't pan out, but we would like to do something with that. He also manages the e-vault, which is all the sample ballots, facts and figures, elections, all of the that type of thing, which I guess right now is huge. So all the voter registrations, that kind of thing. The sheriff, we don't provide security for the sheriff's building, but we do maintenance and all those things. We don't maintain his vehicles. He does that on his own. But we do have a lot of interaction with them. And then the coroner, and I guess all I'm gonna say about that is it's better to be seen than viewed. Everybody understands that. So, that's, that's summed that up pretty good. So, but I guess I'll go into some of the things that we then have partial, kind of more direct involvement with is the health department and some of the activities that they have. They have a board, but there are, seems to be more crossover between the director of the health department and myself, Dan Martindale, and it's in some areas related to the health department, although they're pretty autonomous as well. We have 2 county commissioners on that, two. Yeah, see, I have the.
And 1 councilman.
And 1 council. So they do have an oversight board, but we do have a little bit more involvement with that. And then there's some other affiliated, it's listed down on the bottom of the org chart as affiliated agencies, and you know, it includes the Small Business Development Center, Workforce, PTAC, and some of those organizations. And we have you know, kind of more involvement with the directors of those departments, if you will call them departments or agencies, I guess would be the better. You know, when I was in New York, it was all territories. So he knows it's an inside joke. Let's see.
Henry and I actually spent some time, I think about the same time, in Virginia together, not in the same community, but we have some Virginia jokes that we share too.
Yeah,
Now, you gotta tell more of the jokes.
which one?
When Henry was the regional building official, he says, I have the pleasure of working with the city and the county. And Henry always referred to the city as the Holy Roman Empire, and he referred to the county as the Ottoman Empire.
They're equally dangerous. I assure you. At the time, we always said that the Ottomans would just kill you. But the Holy Roman Empire would like to dig a pit in front of their castle and put you in there so they could come out daily and see you suffer. But which one were you? You were the Ottomans. But Jeff is a big history buff, and so we would get into some conversations about history, and you know, I think we have some common interest in that. But I did want to get into some of the things that we do have involvement with, and I guess Jeff mentioned his biggest issues, you know, probably roads. Ours probably the same. You know, I guess you know, we have 1,081 miles of paved road and 1,049 of gravel. So we have a lot of road, and I think we were using, you remember the movie Snow Days? Well, I think we were using that as a training video of how to hit those mailboxes last year. I'm like, well, you know, change your training program. What the heck are you doing? So, I mean, we had a gang. I thought they were like swerving to hit them. But that's not what would happen. I think the snow was of a consistency that the force of the plow in the snow, 2 minutes? Okay. Sorry, I get off track. But anyway, so there is quite a bit of roads that we do maintain. Facilities, we have 130 county-owned facilities, of which this is one of them that we you know, either leased or own, and that's in about 3 million square foot of office space that we maintain, office and garages for maintenance and those kind of things. We also maintain 132 city buildings, and that consists of 1.5 million square foot, and that's through is it an IGA or MOU? IGA, intergovernmental agreement. Security, we you know, provide security for all the county buildings with the exception of the sheriff's office. You know, I guess you know, all snow removal, ice, emergency, those things, and there's in excess of 3,000 complaints annually in public works. Let's see where it must be on the back. And there's also flood and fire recovery activities, fleet. manage a fleet of just about 1,200 vehicles and equipment. And that covers 21 departments that we maintain the fleet for. We have 3 maintenance garages, 12 fuel sites, and we also have a very small division that looks at ADA, accessibility, both on the highways and our buildings. And we've really spent an awful lot of time trying to step up the accessibility, both in the sidewalk ramps, as you've added. I think last year the number was between you and I was about 2,000, and you've done a whole lot more this year. 2,000 new curb ramps, so you can get on and off the sidewalks easily. Budget and finance, the budget for 2017. Well, there's a budget hearing today. Hopefully it'll go well. $321 million. The sheriff is $48 million of it. Parks is $2.8 million. Planning is $2 million, and Department of DHS, Social Services, as it used to be known, is $70 million. There's about 624 employees out of social services, and they cover all kinds of things. And let me just touch on, there's also human resources, IT, and I think we have to get not used to saying IT anymore. I think it's just more technology, just plain old technology, and we have to kind of change our thinking. And I can I can answer any questions in any of those areas. So I know I skipped over some of them, but I'm out of time.
And I'm going to just interrupt for just a minute because we have another elected official who's walked in to join us. Pete Lee is a representative to the Colorado State House. And thank you for joining us, Pete.
My pleasure. Thank
You're
you.
welcome to sit in the front here.
I'm doing well. Standing and drinking coffee.
I just wanted to make that introduction. We also have a few city employees, and I don't think we have a county employee. Am I wrong? Okay, so we have Ryan Kiefer-Tiller in the back and Nina Vetter here in the front, who are Ryan's in land use and Nina's in budget. Okay.
Nina's my boss. She keeps me on the straight and narrow.
So, questions?
Well, we have done exactly this.
Can you explain the health department a little bit more for me, please? It sounds like there's two different, I know Dan is over all of it, but explain a little more.
I don't know, can you help?
Yeah. The health department is, the Board of Health is appointed by the Board of County Commissioners. The Board of Health is comprised of, as Henry stated previously, 2 county commissioners, and then also a city council representative. The city of Colorado Springs has a permanent seat on the Board of Health, and currently Councilmember Tom Strand is the council member, and then it rotates between the other municipalities, Fountain, Monument, Manitou Springs, and so forth. Also, you have other citizens at large who are appointed to the Board of Health. The Health Department is an affiliate agency of the county, but it's an independent agency. The Board of Health determines all policy activities. The Board of Health is responsible for the hiring and the management of the organization, and the management organization is delegated to the Public Health Director. And then the Public Health Director has functions under him, everything relating from environmental services and restaurant inspections, to immunizations, to birth and death files, and all of that. And the Health Department works very closely. If you're doing any type of building activity, like if you're a school building a new cafeteria, the Health Department's going to be very involved in that process.
So the city literally has no function within the health department other than having someone sit on the board.
What happened in 1976, if my history serves me correctly, my understanding is that you had a joint city-county health department, similar to what you had in Pueblo. And the city of Colorado Springs came to an agreement with the county that the former health facility, which is at 301, 305, the city owned. The city granted that property to El Paso County, and the agreement that was made between the chairman of the Board of County Commissioners and the mayor at that point in time. And so when the city granted that property, then the city relinquished all responsibilities for any future funding requirements of the health department. And then the county then became responsible for funding of the health department. So the health department receives funding through three sources. They have what I call revenue that comes from inspection fees. They have fee and also other revenue components. They have funding through grants. They have funding through the state, and they have funding through the county.
Didn't the original city health department start about 1877 or something? I mean, it's really quite a long time ago.
Thank you.
You guys are being awfully quiet this morning. Nancy?
Well, whenever I raise my hand, I think Dave just probably goes, sidewalks. And so snow removal, that's my issue. If you can imagine, you may know this area where North Nevada swerves to the right and becomes Dublin. Are you familiar with that area? And so if you imagine where Trader Joe's is.
Yes.
And then ultimately where Sprouts is. That's the area where I live. And from just across the street of Trader Joe's, all the way around where there are businesses and so forth, and we finally get into residential, there's 1.5 miles of sidewalk, some of which probably belongs to UCCS, a whole bunch of it belongs to various businesses. And then there is 0.4 miles that is owned, part of it by the city and part of it by the county. And on days that I imagine myself to be the world's most persuasive person, I think that I could probably get these businesses to keep the walks clean, including the 0.4 mile that belongs to the city and county. I'm just wondering, do you think I'll be able to do it? And if I'm not, is there, because I can't imagine the city and county running out there with a snow blower and cleaning it just for me. So what, is it really a matter of getting the businesses to be good neighbors and take care of it, or what's the solution? Because that's almost 0.5 mile of sidewalk, and it's 10-foot wide sidewalk.
Technically, all sidewalks are owned by the city, technically. But the city has an ordinance in place that, based upon the property that's directly adjoining or has direct use of that sidewalk, then that property is, our property owner is responsible for maintaining the sidewalk
In
clearance.
this case, it is the city and the county. It goes over a waterway and it butts Pulpit Rock Park. So.
And so by the ordinance, what's interesting is, if you're in Columbus, Ohio, the city and the county are going to maintain all the sidewalks. They're going to clear them. They actually have people out doing that. I would say going back to at least the 1880s, the city's always had an ordinance in place in which the property owners that were directly responsible or had access to that sidewalk had to maintain that sidewalk.
So you're saying the very first business that's north of that sidewalk and the very first business that's south of that sidewalk would be responsible for taking care of that 0.4 miles?
If the property owner has direct use and access to that sidewalk, they should be maintaining that sidewalk.
I don't think I'm going to get that, but I'll try.
Probably not. And and we try to be sensitive to it. When we have heavy snowfall, we try to encourage commercial businesses and residences to keep the sidewalks clear. The county does a really good job in clearing a lot of the sidewalks downtown and helping with that. The downtown partnership clears. The city tries to ensure that the sidewalks around city buildings are clear. But it's a lot of work.
So if it were to come down to, what the ordinance says is if somebody slips and falls, and they can sue whoever is responsible for that sidewalk. You're saying they could sue the businesses that are immediately north and south of it?
I'm gonna defer to our good attorney here, can respond to that. I don't try to ever encourage litigation, our
I
litigious
just don't know what
environment.
to threaten these people with, you know.
But, by ordinance though, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ryan, isn't it 48 hours you're supposed to,
I believe that's correct.
within 48 hours of the last last inclement weather event, the property owners are required to clear the sidewalks.
Nancy, we should talk about our Snow Angel program. Maybe that would be something that would be
Right.
helpful to get businesses to be more of a good neighbor.
Since there's not this overwhelming barrage of questions coming to Henry and I, a couple things I just want to say on how we do really well together. Yes, I'll give the example of the Talcott fire.
I'm sorry?
The Talcott fire. Yes, that's what the official name of it is. It was a fire that started on Rampart Range Road, and the county responded, and both the CSU Wildland Fire Unit provided direct response because of some of the CSU resources. And then the City of Colorado Springs Fire Department responded and provided mutual aid. And so we worked very well together to combat that fire situation. And we were just fortunate enough that we had drops in temperature, changes in wind, that the fire was able to be controlled and it didn't get beyond our control, because it could have been a very different type of situation yesterday. The police chief and the sheriff, I think, as many of you aware, worked very, very well hand in hand. Emergency management, how we coordinate, and the allocation of resources and assets. We work very well with each other.
Talk a little bit about 301, 305. The two, the sheriff and it may not happen, but it's.
Will you talk about it?
Okay. You previously mentioned the health department building on Union, and it ceased being the health department building when the CSC opened, and they moved over there.
2012.
2012. So it ceased to be used for anything. Well, I think there was some record keeping in there, so we really tried to find a good use for that building, and there was a school that was interested in buying the property, and I think the renovation costs, it has some asbestos problems. It's got its issues. It's an old building. It's very stout, but also that causes some problems. But anyway, along the path to find something to do with that, some use for that building, the sheriff and the police chief got the idea of doing three things there: joint evidence storage, joint crime lab, and joint 911 dispatch, right? So currently there's a study being funded by the sheriff's department to see about the feasibility of using that building for that, or the possibility of tearing that building down and building a new facility of some sort. So there's there's ongoing things where it makes sense. We don't know where that study will come in. My own personal opinion from having walked that building is they're going to say it's got to come down, and that's going to be probably a couple $1 million to take that building out of there. And then you have this gigantic hole in the ground that you need to put another building in, you're going to have to fill it. So, it's problematic for the county one way or the other what to do with that building, but this would be a good location. Both the police department and the sheriff's office feel that would be a good location. But I believe the city's evidence storage is bursting at the seams, and there's some things that they have to keep forever, including a bus, right? So I mean, it's, but I think literally forever, or nearly so. So there's a lot of evidence storage. So they're talking about a fairly large building with a different configuration than anything that's there. There's also some, with Jeff's heavy equipment operator training and our heavy equipment operator training, they're trying to do a joint training so that when one or the other has a training opportunity that we jointly do some of that. We've had conversations about data storage and we have a data storage, two of them, one here and one at CSC, one in the building next door. And the city, I don't know where yours are. But anyway, the possibility of doing some redundant storage you know, there's always difficulties with that. Either there's some lack of the facility has, I don't know, like, I think the newest one was the water sprinkler, and, you know, it needs to be chemical, and so there's always issues to overcome, but there's conversations pretty frequently about what could be done.
One of the, I would say another interesting tidbit of information, the Board of County Commissioners certifies all mill levies in El Paso County. And so all special districts, all municipalities have to go through their mill levy certification and then send that to El Paso County so that can be certified before the end of each year. So the City of Colorado Springs has to go through that process. Also, the City of Colorado Springs is very dependent upon the information that comes from the assessor's office as it relates to the evaluations, as it relates to our Tabor calculations. One of the things that's very interesting, as some of you may know, the City of Colorado Springs has two Tabor calculations we have to be in compliance with. One is the Tabor calculation for the city, and then the second is the Tabor calculation for the state. I think you had a question.
What is the emergency management, or the Office of Emergency Management, and what does that all entail? What do you guys do?
There's two. There's the city's Office of Emergency Management. I mean, they basically, I think, serve the same functions. If there's, first for training, also for preparedness to make sure we're ready to go, and also to actually act. So if there's either a freeze event or a fire event or a flood event, that they actually go and assist the citizens and try to make, you know, either evacuate or, you know, whatever needs to be done.
So is that the three, the fire, the floods, and whatever?
Well, whatever.
Anytime if there's a disaster that is declared on a local level or state level or federal level, then the Office of Emergency Management work to address that situation. There are times when the Office of Emergency Management will come together and function as one and coordinate and support each other. If you have a natural disaster that's moving from the incorporated areas to the unincorporated areas.
We're actually, November 1st, we're going to have the two directors of those offices
And also
here.
hazmat.
Hazmat
You know,
is
so
in
if
there.
there's, you know, I think the county is, what, 2,200 square miles plus or minus. And, you know, there's 8 jurisdictions or 7, Callahan and Rama. The city obviously is the largest jurisdiction within the county, but there's a lot of unincorporated, so the hazmat, the emergencies, Office of Emergency Management would handle the unincorporated areas of the county, where the city emergency management would handle the city's, how many miles?
Almost 200 square miles.
I think Mr. Lee's been waiting for a while.
Thanks, Dave. You started to tee up the question I had, Jeff, and Henry, either way. It has to do with the finances of the city and the county and the sources of revenue. You talked about Tabor. Can you talk a little bit about the comparative tax levels of El Paso County and Colorado Springs vis-a-vis the other 60-plus counties and cities in the state of Colorado? We hear about the police having to extend their response times, and you know, there's a lot of issues which seem to be revenue related. So if you could talk a little bit about the relative tax money that comes into the city and the county, I think that would be elucidating. And you didn't mention the third Tabor that we have here, and that's School District 11. I think we're the only community that has a city and a state and a school district Tabor.
Thanks, Representative Lee, I really appreciate that. And I'll tell you, it's a great concern to me in regards to the city. About somewhere between 8 almost 8 to 10% of the total city revenues is derived from property taxes. El Paso County is almost 50%. And so property taxes are much more sustaining, much more stable. Most of the city's revenue is derived from sales tax. And then you have related fees that support certain operations and functions of the city. Where I am concerned is the city's at the whim of consumer confidence. And so when you have a strong economy, you have strong consumerism, people are willing to spend, people are willing to make investment, then the city does very well. The problem we have is that with the Tabor calculation for the city, the Tabor calculation for the state, and then you have the separate Tabor calculation for the school districts, is that when the economy drops, like we had, the Great Recession started in 2008, then the base budgets for both the city and the county changed. And there's been a lot of discussion about, Tabor is important to a point, is that when you're looking at the fiscal prudence of states and cities across this country, in 2008 to 2012, a lot of cities and counties went bankrupt. They were insolvent, and they had to go through a process. With the state constitution, with Tabor, it required the cities and the counties to make changes. And we were like the accordion effect. All of us went through major downturns. I think the city probably laid off about 300 employees. I think the county did the same thing. But when you look at the calculations, as the economy gets better, when our base dropped, then we're allowed to grow a very small percentage of increase based upon the increase of that base. And so as the economy got better, the city and the county were affected by the Tabor refund situation. So last year, the city was in a Tabor refund situation. The voters agreed to allow us to take the Tabor excess and apply that to some parks improvements. Well, the city of Colorado Springs, because the economy is still continuing to be better, is in another Tabor situation. And so we're probably asking the voters on how we can use that excess revenue to address certain city needs. There has to be something resolved as far as the Tabor base, that the Tabor base is not changing constantly, that's very consistent. One of the things I will say, even without Tabor, is that the fiscal responsibilities of the state of Colorado, even going back to 1913, had the mill levy laws in place in which governmental organizations could only grow by a certain percentage. And you could grow, you could only increase your growth, and that is your revenue collections, by no more than 5%. But what was interesting at that time, in both city and counties, most of their revenue bases were property taxes, is that excess revenue could be saved, and then you could actually use that to fund capital improvements. You could use it to build roads, put in curb and gutter, put in sidewalks, build necessary facilities, address the capital needs of the cities and the counties.
But was that by dictum of the city or by vote from the people?
How
was the input on the stratification of those?
The mill levy law was passed by the state legislature in 1913 and applied to all municipalities and applied to all counties.
Just the excess piece?
Just the excess piece.
So the excess piece.
And so prior to the advent of Tabor, 1991 for the city of Colorado Springs and 1992 for the state, which affected all cities and counties at that point in time, is that when you looked at the reserves that the city and the county had, that was back when the city and the county actually built stuff. We built roads, we addressed our infrastructure needs because, you know, we were able to save and allocate that funding towards public improvements that benefited the citizens. Since Tabor, we're in a losing proposition. And so as long as the economy was good at that point in time and stayed good, we were okay. But once the economy changed, our revenue base changed significantly, and then we're in a vicious cycle that as the economy improves, as our revenue collections increase, then we're having to refund the funds back. to the taxpayers. The county does it through the property tax. All the property tax owners receive a benefit. For the city of Colorado Springs, what we do is reduce everybody's utility bill, all the ratepayers, by a small amount.
And you had, part of that question you had asked, where are we in the line of the other counties? And out of the top 10 counties, El Paso County has the lowest tax per citizen cost, and it's $243 a citizen per year.
And when you
And
compare
if I could add to that, because I keep a little article out of the paper from 2 years ago, which gave the comparative mill levies of
Yeah.
communities. And you're right, the Colorado Springs mill levy is 4.3, $430, okay? The mill levy for Denver is 33 versus 4. The mill levy for Pueblo is 15.6 versus 4.
Right.
The mill levy for Golden is 12.3, Boulder 11.9, North Glen 11.5,
It's for the county or the city?
city,
Well,
city of Colorado Springs. So Colorado Springs, 4.279, 4.3 mills of the 261 cities and counties in Colorado with a property tax, only 35 had lower ones than the city of Colorado Springs. I just wanted to illustrate how low the taxes are in this community and how that really puts a strain on the capability of these gentlemen to deliver the services and build the infrastructure that this community needs.
So what's the answer to that?
D.
I
Bruce,
would ask
Colorado
them.
Springs.
There's, and I'm not gonna speak, this is my personal viewpoint, not the viewpoint of the mayor or city council. What I will say is, there has to be something to address the Tabor calculation in which the base revenue rate does not change. Is that once that's set, then you grow from that point in time. One of the things that's been interesting is that other municipalities, other counties in the state issued a mill levy credit or a Tabor credit, and so in times when times worsened, became very difficult, then they could go back up to that original mill levy rate, so they protected their base. This is a very conservative community, and when the city and the county has looking at establishing a mill levy credit to preserve the mill levy base, overwhelmingly the input the city council and the county commissioners have received to not do that. And so until there's some level of reform on the state level as relates to Tabor and on the local level, then we're in a very, very difficult position. And I will tell you, you know, Mr. Bruce knew exactly what he was doing at that point in time. And the problem is that when that was promoted, Doug Bruce is an expert in giving a 10-second sound bite, and he knows what words to say, and he can put it out there. And when you start talking about taxes and Tabor calculations, it's very, very complicated. And when you're a local government trying to respond, it's almost impossible. And so you got a 10-second sound bite in which he's saying, I'm reducing your taxes to the common person out there. That sounds really good.
I think we had another question back here. Jim?
Let's do it again. What plans do you have in place if you don't have plans to de-Bruce the city, the county, and the state? What plans do you have in place when it becomes time for you to return to the citizen $60 and $70 rather than $4 or $5?
All we can do is, based upon what the Tabor Amendment allows us, is either refund the dollars directly back to the ratepayers of Colorado Springs Utilities or the property owners of the county, or we request from the voters the ability to allocate those funds to very specific city projects. And so with the Tabor refund, that's going to be proposed is that we're actually going to take that money out of the city's reserves and look at allocating that to a specific project, in which we need to do project improvements, there's no question there, or give that back to the ratepayers of Colorado Springs Utilities. And by the way, when you look at establishing your reserves for an organization, the appropriate reserve levels should be somewhere around 20%. The city's probably at 16.1%, and then we're looking at doing a TABOR refund, you're reducing your reserves even more.
That's what I'm saying. That's your plan?
Jeff and Henry, could you talk a little bit about the relationship of the county and the city to PPACG and PPRTA, and how does all that work?
Dave, that's a whole different.
No.
Can I get you each another cup of coffee?
The Council of Governments, PPACG, the most important function of PPACG is it is your MPO. That's your Metropolitan Planning Organization. And so with that, your state and federal funding allocations for road improvements, for transportation infrastructure, that funding allocation comes through your Council of Governments as your MPO, and then it's allocated out to the municipalities and to the county. That is one of the most important functions of the Council of Governments. Now, the Council of Governments here, I believe it was established in 1966, I believe. I could be wrong, but I think it was 66. Maybe it was a little bit earlier. It could have been 64. Prior to that, then funding allocations came from the state directly to the municipalities and to the counties. What happened is, prior to the Council of Government organizations being established, is that when you looked at major metropolitan areas and the states, prior to that, most of that money got sent to your metropolitan areas. Like Denver received a great deal of the funding prior to the establishment of your Council of Governments. President Eisenhower did a lot to promote the activities associated with the Council of Governments. At one point in time, with the Eisenhower administration and with the Nixon administration, they empowered the Council of Governments that all transportation and planning activities of the municipality or the county had to be coordinated through the Council of Governments. When President Reagan came on board, he felt like it created too much bureaucracy. It was slowing the process down, and so President Reagan actually reduced the level of authority and discretion that the Council of Governments had. And so now the Council of Governments' primary focus is going to be mainly is how you look at that allocation and distribution of dollars that goes to transportation-related projects. And so that's very, very important. You have 3 city council members on PPACG, you have 3 county commissioners on PPACG, and the leadership of PPACG rotates each year between the city and the county. PPRTA is probably, I would say, is one of the greatest successes. The city and the county coming together to address what our transportation, infrastructure, and maintenance that we needed. The difference between what the mayor asked of the citizens in 2C versus what he asked, what he supported with PPACG and the PPRTA initiative, is the PPRTA initiative is about building these major regional transportation projects that's moving people east to west and north to south. And so with that, both the city and the county receive maintenance dollars. If it was not for the PPRTA, there'd be very little maintenance that would be going on with your city streets or your county roads, because we really do need that. That goes to road maintenance, that goes to bridge maintenance.
Hey there, I'm Zach. Thank you all for coming on in. You guys had it way easy on the question front compared to what the mayor had to.
Oh, yeah, the mayor
run
told me
last-
about that.
Yeah, I hope that he will come next year again.
Oh, he'll come.
Okay, good. Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, the great political theorist Hannah Arendt said that it was actually though in these finer administrative details that the real ethical questions are happening, but you guys were spared the hardball questions. And I find myself struggling to find a hardball question for you as well. I just have a basic question around the relationship of planning and development between the county and the city and what that looks like. I've been engaged in a lot of neighborhood conversations of a couple neighborhoods in the vicinity of South downtown area, Stratton Meadows and Hillside neighborhood that are neighbors are very, very concerned about, like in the next 20 years, the threat of gentrification and economic development in their community and not being synced into the process of development. And I'm just kind of curious about what the relationship between the county and the city's planning and development side looks like. Is the county a bit more sparsely engaged in development that occurs in the city, or I'm just kind of curious of what that relationship is.
What I would say is that we're going through the initiative of Plan COS. I wasn't sure if you were here when Mr. Wasaki gave the update. The county is providing, is one of our stakeholders as we look at our planning activities for the future of the city of Colorado Springs. The county has to be very involved because when we look at the future development of the city, we have to understand what the impacts are going to be to the unincorporated areas. Because one of the things that people fail to understand is that your entire transportation infrastructure coming to the city is controlled by the county.
Right.
And so as we're looking at our growth and development processes, if the city and the county are not in alignment, then it's going to create direct conflict, and especially as it relates to the citizens.
Do you have Jennifer and Travis coming along?
They've already come.
Oh, they were-
Yes.
They were last week.
Oh, they were.
Yeah.
Well,
So-
a week before the mayor report.
What I will say is, when you look at your planning activities, is that there is, and I'm going to kind of defer to Ryan here to speak up too. You have constant conflict about what should the city of Colorado Springs be doing. And I will tell you, we have to address the redevelopment of our city itself, because for the last 40 years, 1973 being all things were equal. That was the last time in Colorado Springs and El Paso County that all things were equal as it relates to planning, development, city services, county services. From that point coming forward is that when you looked at the development of the city itself, is that it was so much easier to take raw land and development because the neighborhood impacts, the citizen impacts were far less. And now the city's in a position where the city council and the mayor have decided we're not going to do too many more annexations. The only annexations we probably will do is commercial nodes because the city's constantly, chasing the sales tax dollar. Outside of that, Bang Lewis Ranch is your last outpost of future development. But we got to be very focused on the redevelopment of the city, because what we've done is we've built subdivisions. After 30 years, we throw them away. And so there has to be that reinvestment in the city. And, there's neighborhoods in this community that really don't want to change. But what's going to happen, you have a neighborhood, and most of the neighbors are between 78 and 90 years old. As those individuals die out, if you don't have individuals willing to come back in and reinvest and say, this is going to be my home, then you're going to start creating blight. And so the city has got to be very, very focused on the redevelopment and the infill policies to promote certain types of activities. Yes?
Doesn't, in a way, blight create opportunity? I'm thinking of the Mill Street neighborhood. It's kind of at the bottom now. They brought it back a little bit
Right.
after the turn of the millennium,
Right.
after the Montgomery
Right.
dust up.
Right.
But right now, if I were coming to town and looking for interesting, cheap housing, I moved into the west side in 1978 using that as my criteria, interesting and cheap. I think Mill Street meets that now. So as it's a little bit blighted in the city's eyes, it's also affordable.
I will tell you,
You make it nice, it becomes unaffordable to more and more people.
but blight does create opportunities, but how many years are you gonna look at blight? And when you, and I feel very strongly about I call it the broken window syndrome. If the city and the county are not being aggressive in how we look at our redevelopment policies, is that when you have blight, then you're going to create higher levels of crime. And the city and the county do not have enough resources as it relates to addressing those specific needs. And so we have to be looking at policies and how we encourage people to redevelop, reinvest in specific areas of our community. Right now, the city's had an emphasis on northern Nevada and the northern part of the city. The city has got to look at the southeastern part of the city. And that's where our redevelopment focus has to be. I'm sorry.
Sorry, just a quick follow-up question around that is, I definitely agree that there needs to be a prioritization of redevelopment in the southeastern corridor of our city, and also like this sort of southeastern corridor of the downtown area. But what I was saying was feeling very strongly that it needs to be a co-emergent process with pre-existing neighborhoods and cultural sensibilities of the neighborhood. Like when we look at the historical, grounding of the hillside neighborhood, it is a mixed racially and income level neighborhood, but it is a historically African American neighborhood. And when we talk about reinvesting, we need to, I just really hope that it is a co-emergent process with folks who are also there, because it's not just older folks who are dying off. There are families. There's a real sense of cultural place, and I just really would love to ensure that there is different stakeholders who are at that table.
I'm a person that really encourages the preservation of our ethnic, cultural areas of the city, because you don't want to lose it. It's what made those areas great, and why some of those areas are still great today. One of the things I was in discussion with our new transportation commissioner, Rocky Scott, is that what we've done in this community is we've built great shopping centers. We built great shopping centers, they had great stores, great restaurants, and that probably has a life of about 20 years. And I look at University Village. University Village is a great economic hub, a beehive of activity. There's not one blade of grass. And so when we look at our redevelopment policies, we have to look at how we create town centers, our community central points, that why people go to that neighborhood. Is it because they have great parks? Is it because there's certain cultural aspects that's going to be promoted through that area? And so we have to look at that very, very closely, because if we're just talking about building great shopping complexes, you have a 20-year life there, and then you better start looking at how you're going to look at a redevelopment opportunity. You have to create an energy of why people want to go there. And so if there's cultural events going on in different parts of our community, you want to encourage people to go to that part of town, to be part of that activity. And so I do see there's a renaissance going on in our community, but I totally agree with you. There has to be a way that we're all working together to encourage people to invest in particular areas of our community, but also preserve the cultural aspect of that community.
And if I can sort of add on to that, there was a pretty good study done a few years ago that Carl Schuler led on great streets, which looked at the South Academy corridor particularly, and made the point that we have to figure out how to bring that street to a more human scale, and to celebrate the neighborhoods that have grown up around those shopping areas, a lot of which are not very well utilized now. But those neighborhoods have become, some of those neighborhoods are where the centers of our Korean culture in town. Some are other, other minorities. And the challenge, I think, is figuring how to get those centers to serve those communities that have grown up around them, rather than trying to make them into First and Main version 2 or something like that. So anyway, if you're interested in that, take a look at that Great Streets approach, which I think is online.
I think it is too.
And if it isn't, we have a copy. Sarah, you have a question?
Well, maybe just to follow up, and maybe this is naive, but, and I know kind of what Zach's referring to in the South Nevada and all the development that's happening there. Is it up to land use? Is it up to you mentoring council and things? Or is it up to nonprofits to encourage that kind of development, that kind of cultural, rich, local development? Whose job is that?
That was my question too.
Okay.
Because it's almost as if we wipe our hands and let the developers run wild with concrete jungles.
Right.
And so if they're not told that percentage of this concrete jungle has to be grassy, sustainable area, then you get the Citadel Mall, and you get everything up and down Academy, and you get even Briargate that has a shelf life, because there's no planning for the future. So that's a great question, Sarah. Whose responsibility is it to guide these developers instead of taking the money?
It's
Instead of appearing just to take the development dollars.
and I'll be careful here. I mean, I'm a pro-growth person, and I feel very strongly. And I'll give an example. I remember having a conversation with the city administrator for Fort Collins back in the early 2000s. And Fort Collins took a very anti-growth position. The council did. It almost bankrupted the city. And Fort Collins had to go back and reevaluate how it was going to grow. Now, how they approached it is they promoted redevelopment, they promoted raw land development. At the same time, they looked at how you create that town center concept. How do you create that energy around certain areas of the city and certain neighborhoods? And I mean, you'll still get your shopping complexes and all that in the Fort Collins area, but how do you create that neighborhood process, that neighborhood stabilization? One of the things we looked at the city of Colorado Springs is that we changed the name of code enforcement, being from just a code enforcement to neighborhood services. Because neighborhood services, you think about it very, very differently. Neighborhood stabilization is very, very important. And how do you look at bringing the neighborhoods together? Because it comes back to answer Sarah's question. It has to be y'all providing input to city council and to the board of county commissioners. I mean, there's recommendations that comes from your professional staff, but we're bound by code and regulations. And so we're following the code requirements. And if an applicant comes through and they've met all the requirements as it relates to the code, then that city council, that board of county commissioners is hard pressed to say, you can't do this.
Then how did Gold Hill Mesa do it? Because it seems like they did it right. Lots of open spaces, lots of congregating spaces, lots of green spaces.
That's a 40-year evolution. And I will tell you, if the city and the county do not get aggressive on our tax policies and how we look at promoting that type of activity, Gold Hill Mesa will not survive. Because it really comes down to how we reinvest in those types of projects. And we have to look at our tax policies to promote certain types of economic development activities. And that's what's really important to City Council and the Board of County Commissioners.
What did we do right?
Can I, I'm going to say that we've got, Mr. Yankowski's got another engagement he's got.
And so do I. We both had budget hearings.
And we've tried, at least the last several of these, to stop about this time so that these guys would have a chance to catch their breath, and also people would have an opportunity to ask an individual question if one or the other of you has time for that. But we'll stop our questions now, and you can rush these guys before they leave. Thank you both very much. We really appreciate it.